Today we're going to learn about manpower planning. This is actually a really important function of all companies when it comes to their human resources development. Manpower planning, let's just write that key term over here so we have it in front of us. Now, what is manpower planning? All it is, it simply says that a company needs to decide upon how many people it needs in the organization. Manpower refers to employees. So, with effective planning, the company will be able to figure out how many employees it actually needs, and what's more, they can then go and find and recruit these employees. This is all part of manpower planning. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is, why is this so important? Why is manpower planning so vital to all companies? Well, to begin with, very simply, with proper planning, it will help you to determine and predict your, let's just write this in, sorry, a bit of typo there, your future manpower needs. In other words, it will enable all the companies to figure out how many employees that it actually needs in order to achieve its objectives. If the objective of, say, McDonald's is to open up new branches, then if the human resource managers have a proper planning process in place, it will then enable McDonald's to figure out how many new employees it will actually need for these branches, and then it can go take the appropriate steps to hire those relevant individuals. So it's really important in enabling a company to figure out the number of future employees that they need. A second reason why manpower planning is so important, because if you have proper planning in place, it will enable the company to adjust and change their manpower requirements. Whoops, again, my typing today is not working so well. Let's try it again. To adjust their manpower requirements according to external factors. Now, if you remember, we learned about external factors when you were back in secondary 4. These are things like political factors, laws, consumer taste, consumer preferences. These external factors are constantly changing. And as a result, companies need to change. Let's take a school as an example. And let's take customers' taste. The customers for schools are the students and the parents. Now, let's say that customers and students no longer are interested in business. They no longer want their students to study BAFS. And as a consequence of that, students will not want to take the business studies class at school. The school then will need to adjust to this external factor change, and they will need to hire teachers that teach other subjects that the students want. And the lonely business teacher may no longer be needed, or maybe that lonely business teacher is going to have to go learn a new set of skills. So external factors are constantly changing. Consumer taste, laws, competitive situation, political situations change, and you need to adjust the number of employees that you have to cope with those changes. Last but not least, the other reason why it's really important, it's kind of similar to what I just referred to with external factors, but it really is a standalone point, is that organizations have to comply, let's put the word with here, comply with government regulations. Government regulations refer to laws and policies that the government may pass. Now, the government may pass a rule saying, an equal opportunities rule saying that all companies have to have an equal number of males and females in their organization. As a result, the company will need to do appropriate manpower planning so that they have an equal number of males and females in their organization. They may need to hire more males, or they may need to hire more females based upon what the current situation is. Or maybe the government may pass rules saying that all your products need to be of a sufficiently clean and safe standards. As a result, with proper manpower planning, the company can then figure out how many new technical individuals do they need in their company that can help them to comply with these new safety standards that the government is passing. So hopefully you can see why manpower planning is so important, and moreover, you should also be able to ask the question, what influences manpower planning? What things change and adjust that makes manpower planning so important? Let's go to the second key concept that you should be aware of, and that is the manpower planning process. Now, when I say process, all I'm referring to is, how do companies do manpower planning? What are the steps that they have to take? So number one is always starting with identifying the objectives of the company. Let's type that in there. So objectives of the company. What exactly is a company trying to achieve? Are they trying to expand? Are they trying to be more competitive? Are they trying to move into different product lines? So once they identify what their objectives are, then the company will be able to make appropriate plans. Let me just put a 1 here to show that this is the first part of the manning process. Now let's go to step 2. So once you've figured out what your objectives are, then clearly after that you're going to start thinking about you're going to assess your current manpower situation and compare it. So let's use versus your future needs. So do you have 500 workers today? And maybe you have 500 workers today, but you realize you need 600 workers tomorrow. In that case, you're going to have to hire 100 additional people. So you're looking at what you currently have, and you're comparing it to what you need. And so after you've done this second step, then you move on to trying to figure out, if you need these 100 additional people, where are these 100 additional people going to come from? And so this is the third step, where you're looking at the supply of manpower. How many workers are available? And you look at 2 different things. You can look at your internal manpower needs. How many workers have you got within your company? Because maybe you may want to transfer some workers from one department to another to fill certain needs. And if they're not enough qualified candidates internally, then clearly you're going to look externally. You're going to look at all of the workers out there in the market and see whether there is sufficient supply out there to fulfill your needs. And finally, the last step and the final step, which is probably the most detailed and the most important, is you actually have to then develop your action plans. In other words, you have to actually go out and hire these workers. Or maybe you might realize that you have too many workers and you may need to actually get rid of some workers. Hopefully that never happens to you. But sometimes you may have too many workers and you may need to cut down on the number of workers that you have. That, therefore, in a nutshell, is the manpower planning process. Number 1, figure out your objectives. Number 2, look at how many employees you currently have, compare them to what you need. Number 3, figure out how many workers are actually out there in the market that can help you to fulfill your needs as supply of manpower. And lastly, develop action plans whereby you actually go and hire the people that you need.